I'm looking back on 2023, and I thought I would share some of my, thoughts with you. Welcome to What's Jonathan Thinking? 2023 was not a banner year for me. Okay, I should be kinder to myself. It wasn't terrible. It was just kind of meh. It had wonderful ups, but really discouraging downs as well. By all measures, from 2022, this year should have been a year that catapulted me forward. The year that I used amazing developments in 2022 to harness that momentum and propel me to the very potential that I dream, hope to reach someday. But it wasn't. 2023 was, as my kids would say, kind of mid. It had some good highs, but the lows were equally low. And I just feel like the very thing I should have had was the very thing I feel I lost, and that is momentum. I reached a place in 2023 where I knew that I needed to find a different strategy for really approaching life. Things I had set in motion were simply not going well. And the leader that I am is the kind of person who looks in the mirror when something goes wrong. I rarely look outside the window or the mirror and find someone to blame. But because of that innate feeling of responsibility and expectation, I tend to keep all of my stress internal. And it's fine when it's manageable. But last year, it reached a point where simply it wasn't. And I started making mistakes, which to me was just unacceptable. I know, no one expects perfection from me or anyone, but I expect perfection. And when I don't achieve it, it's demoralizing for me. So this is clearly not a healthy place. It's not productive. It's backwards looking, not forward looking. It's one that has diminishing returns. So I took a minute. And in this minute, I found the power of the pause. It sounds like common sense, right? But I think when you are in the heat of the moment, when you are in the midst of, a crisis, when you feel like your environment is expecting you to have the answers, or when you feel that professionally that is what the situation requires, remembering to pause before we do whatever is next is likely the last thing that comes to mind. We feel we are in a fight or flight moment. If we fight, we may move to a way too emotional place. If we choose to flight, well, the game is over, and who wants that? But as I have come to learn the hard way, and I mean it when I say the hard way, being the best leader doesn't mean being the person who has all the immediate answers all the time. Often the best leader in the room is not the person with the best answers, but is the person with the best questions. So my thoughts quickly move to another question. How do we evolve to be this kind of leader? Let's all first acknowledge that in our fast-paced world, the first thing we need to overcome is the perception that asking for a minute to think is a sign of weakness, or that taking a minute before you respond to something means you are less of a leader than the most decisive person in the room. Sometimes we need to just take that minute. Here are my key lessons from 2023. First, I don't know what the technical term for this is, but I purely just needed to chill. My angst, my emotions were not helping the situation. They were actually harming the situation. So I found my first moment of inflection was what I grammatically know as a semicolon. A semicolon gives us a moment to pause and take a breath before we finish the thought or pivot in a new direction. So my first lesson was that I need to work on letting things go. I am a person who far too easily gets stuck in the past. The power of the pause is about how do we move forward. Next, I needed to create room for curiosity. Other people had fresh perspectives and new ideas. I needed to create the space for those ideas to flourish so that we could iterate forward together with a solid plan. I needed to pause and listen and allow calmer heads to prevail. And finally, I had to stop feeling like every question required an immediate answer. Sometimes the best answer could come from asking more questions. And this again required pausing, synthesizing, synthesizing information, removing the expectation of an immediate response, and replacing it with a focus on ensuring that the final response was the right one. As a leader, I'm expected to have answers. That's the job. But the answer that comes from thoughtful moments are orders of magnitude better than the in the minute emotional response that might be wrong because it's an emotional response. Some interesting things started happening to me when I started incorporating this power of the pause in my life. My relationships everywhere started getting better. My relationship with my wife, with my kids, at work, with team members of all levels in the organization. It was like the sunshine came out. It's not that the stress was reduced by any means. It's consulting. Stress is what we do. It's just the impact that the stress had on me was, I don't know, different. In time, my confidence returned, my clarity of purpose returned, my sense of self returned, and most importantly, my sense of self efficacy returned. I didn't need to stop. I just needed to pause and think and reflect and be sure of the next step forward. It's 2024. It's a new year, a blank slate. My hope is that 2024 is not just a different number than 2023, but a different kind of year. It needs to be the year where I find the path to incorporating the power of the pause while simultaneously spurring myself and my organization forward into action that brings meaningful, productive, demonstrable impact to my company, our customers, and our teams. I may always be an emotional person, but I don't have to let that cloud my leadership style. I need to be sure to channel my emotions towards productive ends and have the awareness of when they are not. My mantra this year is going to be a question. Do I need to pause before I act? It's a reminder that there are a lot of punctuation options on my journey. I can add a comma or a colon, or I can just stop with a period, or I can pause like a semicolon and choose which direction I go next. I can be the leader who pauses first and speaks second. There's no harm in a semicolon. I think I need to remind myself of that from time to time. There's no harm in a semicolon. So, what are my power of the pause strategies? Well, I found one good way of summarizing the power of the pause in a TEDx talk presented by Linda Ulrich. She offers this: be kinder than you need to be. There's a unique and innate power in kindness. Often, that kindness begins with being kind to yourself. And if you can operate from that place, then instinctively it will extend out to others around you. But if the energy in your universe is pushing you to not be kind, you need to pause. Immediately, hard stop, period, if you need to. Next, exchange contempt for curiosity. Take time to approach adversity not with frustration and anger, but with an interest in understanding how someone came to taking their position or viewing the situation as they do. You might just diffuse some situations if you approach it this way. Sometimes there are difficult people in our worlds. That's always going to be an occupational risk. You don't have to sing kumbaya and join song circles with them and become best friends, but taking the time to be curious rather than reacting to their energy is always going to bring you to a better place. And finally, listen to understand, not to respond. Instead of responding, command yourself not to respond. Command yourself to seek understanding. Command yourself to listen first, respond second. I realize now that I mistook what my line of work was. I thought I was paid to have the answers. That's incorrect. I'm paid to make sure my customers find the right answers. And that's a fundamental shift in mindset. if understanding that can come from giving myself the grace of a pause before I act, it seems that everyone around me will be better for it. These are just my thoughts on channeling the power of the pause to positive results. Do you use the power of the pause in your life? And if so, please share with us some of your strategies. Until then, make it a great new year. Make it a great 2024. And thank you for tuning in to What's Jonathan Thinking. I'll see you next time.